But I suppose what I've not really told you about was how I ended up sort of here. And what happened in my recovery experience was that I was very ill with secondary services. I felt on my back and in and out of secondary service care for well over a decade, until eventually a number of things happened, and I, via the avenues of some voluntary work and then applying for a part-time job, I was able to utilise my lived experience with the County Council's Social Inclusion Service, which then later became part of LCFT. So the title of my presentation is how we grew our personal recoveries, because what we did was we piggybacked on an organisation that you may have heard of called the Incredible Edibles. And then I've got two other titles here, and I was amusing myself by how we grew, and I could talk to you about, growing vegetables and taking them along to local food banks and things like that. But in actual fact, what it made me think of was how we were able to use horticultural therapy techniques to help us participate and influence, more importantly, a community that we as a group of service users definitely didn't feel part of. And that was our problem. So when we talk about goal setting and ambitions and personal desires and how that can formulate how someone approaches their recovery, we found that all of our goals, all of our personal desires and virtually every one of our ambitions weren't there in terms of the provision for us to achieve them. Partly that's because we set out not really knowing what they were, but partly it was because once we piggybacked on the Incredible Edibles to get ourselves, as Simon rightly said, a non-stigmatised space in which we could meet together and offer peer support. We eventually developed what was a sort of an informal coaching and mentoring project based around the use of horticultural therapy, which gave us a combination of science and art, which enabled us to sort of get the juices flowing and get conversations flowing. And we just worked on the basis that we had no plan as long as we were talking about what our plans were. And that really meant what we said was we want to get involved in the community. We want the community to accept us as people and not stigmatise us. We want to influence, we want to do something positive with our experiences, all of which came from the peer support and the personal reflection. And ultimately, we wanted to take advantage of what grows out of a thing called biophilia, which is a term coined by a man called Wilson, who says, as people, we have an innate need to be part of nature and in some way related to it. And then the work of Sempic and others, who you probably know are quite active in researching horticultural therapy and its benefits, they've created this sort of model which says, effectively, as we thought when we talked about it, not so much that we all go because we're not really in society and we go and help clear people's things cheaply for the council and we're sort of watched by someone and then we go home and forget about it. But really, if we're going to sit in a space in the community and talk about how we do something with the community, we're talking about anything from the physical activity and talking about the food you eat, through to the social interaction processes, through to actually gardening and actually doing some horticulture, not just brewing up and stuff. And then ultimately skills development, skills transfers, employment, all those things. We use that vehicle of horticultural therapy, but we genuinely have seen examples where other projects can facilitate the same thing, because we're back to that idea of a non-stigmatising space, peer support, and as you'll see later on, what we believe is quite important, the ability to listen to somebody else who's been through some of the stuff that you think isn't good in your life. Anybody who's come through it in any way and can talk positively about it, we used to sort of milk them for ideas, and we used to exchange ideas like that. And essentially what we ended up doing was creating an environment where I was employed by the Social Inclusion Service, and I actually trained as a coach and mentor. But effectively, the peer support and the coaching and mentoring came from amateurs service users amongst each other, and all the ideas, all the positive energy, all the positive activity came from that group activity, if you like, and the relationships that people built and had already. And people then decided what they wanted to do was get back to work. So we'd look at the work support services, and tragically for the council's provision of that, the funding was being cut. So we just decided to get on and do it, and it meant a sort of an ad hoc piecemeal thing where people said, I've got a skill in mechanics, so if we can get enough money together doing a few gardens for people, you can buy a car and you can do it up and get another one, that sort of thing. So we just sort of got on with it, really. And what it really gave us was an absolute sense of belonging to a community that for, in my case, well over a decade, in other people's a decade and 8 years, 6 years, 5 years, we hadn't felt part of at all. So really, that was how we decided to go about focusing on ourselves, and that's what came out of what we did from that. Thank you.